Scripture, you're probably like, where in the world is he going with this? I don't think that's one of those weeks, right? It's probably pretty obvious where we're going with this one today. But so ever since I've been here, I usually like to start opening up with a discussion question for you to turn to your neighbors or those around you. Today's discussion question is, who was the last person who really showed up for you, and what difference does that make? If you don't have the answer to that, stand up and walk directly to me. But turn to each other and discuss this question. Any good answers from your neighbors? I know I was talking to Miss Michelle during the passing of the peace. She's doing a lot of showing up lately, right? Showing up for her mom. Yep. Yep. I've been hearing a lot of stories about all the showing up that Laura Dean and Corey have done throughout the years for people. I've heard a lot of stories about that lately. Any other good ones? So I remember a few years ago, I went through like a very rough patch. So I had just lost the job that I had basically bet my whole future on. I'd given up everything to pursue this call to ministry, but I was just a little too gay for that church. And without the protection as a queer person, I wasn't going to be ordained under the conservative bishop in Missouri. And I know I've talked about this before. In that time, I was beat down, I was broken, I was defeated. But do you know what? There was a community of people that showed up for me. My friend Debbie, I remember, she's a seminary friend of mine. She's actually a care pastor, so she's professionally good at this. But she would call me and check up every day and leave messages that said things like, hey, I know you might not have the capacity to answer. Don't worry about calling me back, but just know that I'm there for you and I love you. My friend Katie, who, if you were here a few months ago, she filled in when Andrew was on vacation. She would take me to brunch every Friday just to get me out of the house. And my core group, or my small group, from the church that I was a member of, would show up with meals and check on me and call me. My community literally carried me through what could have been the darkest season of my life, carried me through that season so I could make it to the next season, which has been fruitful and full. Ecclesiastes tells us the truth that most of us learn the hard way. Two are better than one, for if they fall, one will lift up the other. But woe to one who is alone and falls and has no one to help. That's not poetry for poetry's sake. As I was talking with the kids, that was shared lived experience. Ecclesiastes, unlike some of the other wisdom literature, isn't interested in pretending that life works neatly. It assumes exhaustion and failure and moments when our strength runs out. In the wisdom tradition of Scripture, not all wisdom sounds the same. Proverbs offers practical wisdom, the kind you learn early on. It teaches patterns like work hard and things tend to go well. Speak carefully and relationships are preserved. Live wisely and usually life holds together. Proverbs sounds like guidance given at the beginning of adulthood when the world feels mostly predictable. Ecclesiastes, on the other hand, sounds like it's written at the far end of a journey. This is wisdom shaped by disappointment, contradiction, and loss. In the voice of someone who did many things right and still discovered that effort does not guarantee outcome, that righteousness does not insulate us from pain, and that time eventually humbles every illusion of control. Ecclesiastes is not rejecting wisdom, it's deepening it. It's the wisdom of someone looking back and saying, I wish I would have known this sooner, how fragile life is, how limited we are, and how much we need one another when the formulas stop working. And it makes a simple claim. Being alone makes everything harder. What's important for us to notice is who Ecclesiastes is talking about. It's not talking about outsiders or those people, not someone who made bad choices. It's just talking about humans. Loneliness isn't a moral failure, it's a human condition. A few years ago, the U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued a public health advisory naming loneliness as an epidemic in our country. He warned that chronic isolation carries the same health risks as smoking or obesity, raising rates of heart disease, depression, anxiety, and early death. What made the warning so striking was this: loneliness isn't confined to any age, any income level, any race, any personality type. It's not about our weakness or failure. It's about what happens when society is structured in ways that pull people apart faster than we can hold one another together. And here's where this matters for us as a church. Some of us here may be struggling with loneliness, but many of us here are not lonely in the same way that our neighbors are. We have relationships. We recognize faces. We can walk in and notice when someone's been away on Christmas vacation from school or maybe he's been out for a health crisis. We check on each other. But our neighborhood is living something very different. People are carrying their entire lives by themselves. Grief without witness. They're experiencing stress without support and illness without care, aging without community, young adults without anchors. Families are stretched too thin without any margins, and we're told this is normal or expected, and sometimes we're even told it's a virtue. Capitalism teaches us to organize life as individuals. You are your own safety net. Your worth is tied to productivity. Your problems are yours to solve alone. Don't ask anyone for help. If you're struggling, the system tells you to buy something, occupy something, or fix yourself quietly. Isolation isn't a failure of that system. It's how that system is designed. Ecclesiastes would call that foolishness, because wisdom said when someone falls, they need someone else. Acts 2 shows us what happens when the Spirit takes that wisdom seriously. The early church didn't set out to become impressive. They didn't build community as a branding strategy or as a way to market to more people. They didn't gather for the sake of comfort alone. They devoted themselves to teaching, prayer, and shared meals. They held what they had loosely, and they practiced generosity. They showed up day after day, and their life together became visible. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it was definitely unmistakable. People looked at them and saw a different way of being human, a way that contradicted the logic of society, and a way that said no one should fall alone. A way that said belonging comes before achievement. And the text says, day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. Not because the church was perfect, but because the church was present. I'm going to say that again. They added to their numbers daily, not because they were being perfect, but because they were present for one another. This season at Holy Covenant is not about learning how to like each other more. I think we do a pretty good job at that. It's about turning outward together. Because just like love and forgiveness and grace, when it doesn't flow outward, it isn't what we are called to do as Christians. It's about asking who around us is falling with no one to help them up. Who has been taught explicitly or implicitly that they are on their own. Who has been isolated by work schedules, economic pressures, grief, aging, shame, or fear. Who doesn't need another institution but needs a place where someone notices them when they're missing. The church exists because God knows what Ecclesiastes shows, that humans were never meant to survive alone. And Acts 2 reminds us that when the church lives that truth publicly, it becomes good news without trying to be. For the next several weeks, we're going to talk about different aspects that make a community strong, a community that our neighborhood needs. Next week, we'll talk about welcome, how we greet people and welcome them in when they're new, because belonging should never be earned. Then we're going to talk about presence, because consistency matters more than intensity. We'll talk about care, because burdens multiply when they're carried alone. We'll talk about service, because love has to take shape in action. And finally, we'll talk about invitation, because a meaningful experience shouldn't be kept to ourselves. This is not about saving the church, it's about being the church. a community that quietly resists a world organized around isolation, a community that practices shared life in the face of scarcity, a community that helps people up when they fall, a community that practices radical welcome to those who are hurting. Ecclesiastes tells us what happens when no one is there. Acts 2 shows us what happens when someone is. So the question before us isn't, are we connected enough? It's this: who needs us to show up next week? Because two are better than one, and neighbors are watching, whether we know it or they know it or not.